This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News, news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Brother Bailey, you there?
Yes.
All right, We All Be is going to have on Brother Bailey, who is the author of Witnessing Brother Malcolm X, the master teacher, who was a dear friend of Brother Malcolm, worked on his organization on Afro-American Unity, and was close to Brother Malcolm the last year and several months of his life. How are you doing today, sir?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm great. And I just want to talk to you because we just celebrated, or not celebrated, but we observed the 51st anniversary of Brother Malcolm's untimely passing or assassination this past Sunday. And I just want to get your thoughts about, Brother Malcolm 51 years later. And also, I just want to talk about your book as well.
Yeah, well, the word that you said, it was a commemoration.
Mm-hmm.
February 21st is a commemoration of the assassination.
Yes, sir.
May 19th, his birthday, is when we celebrate.
That's right.
So I think that's true. And, I think my book tells you exactly what I felt about Brother Malcolm and what he did for me personally. And that's why I use the term a master teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Witnessing Brother Malcolm X, the master teacher. Because I think there's no more important members of a community than a master teacher. And that's what he was. And he taught me, he taught me, in very practical ways, like how to use words. I was the editor of our newsletter. In the very first issue of the newsletter, I was writing about the killing of that 15-year-old boy by that New York City cop that caused the Harlem uprising in 1964.
Mm-hmm.
And Brother Malcolm was over in Africa at the time at the OA, Organization of African Unity Conference. So he called back to the office, and each person had to, who was doing something specific, had to kind of give him an update. So when it was my turn, I read him what I had written, and I said, "Eyewitnesses to the murder." And he stopped me, and he said, "Brother Peter, you can't use the word murder. Murder and murderer are legal terms. You can only use when the person is convicted. And we know this policeman is not going to be convicted." He said, "Call him a killer and refer to it as a killing, because he's a killer, and it's a killing no matter what the circumstances." And we don't say that. If you call him a murderer, call it a murder, refer to him as a murderer, he can sue for defamation of character.
Right.
And so he said, so I had to change the thing to killer. I put it in the book, that whole scene that whole article in the book. And we had already run off about 600 of those things with the old mimeograph machine. So I just scratched out the word murder and wrote killing in there. And sure enough, when that cop was acquitted, he sued Martin Luther King's organization and CORE for putting out information calling him a murderer. So that was a master teacher, man. He knew the system. We didn't get in trouble because of what we said, because Brother Malcolm told us that if we're having a meeting or a rally, and somebody at our rally or meeting stands up and says we ought to go bomb the subways, he said put that person out immediately, because 9 times out of 10 that's a plant. And if that is discussed for 30 seconds, everybody can be picked up and for conspiracy. And even though they have a very weak case, they can keep the titles in the course for a couple of years, spending all your time, money, and resources.
Wow.
So he said, nobody who's serious will stand up at a meeting talking about going to go bomb the subway. So somebody does that, put them out.
Wow.
Well, those of us involved with Brother Malcolm, we never got in trouble for what we said, because he taught us about that kind of thing. Sometimes the person doing the loudest talking is an informer who's advocating. I saw that recently, brother. I was watching when they were having those demonstrations about Ghana up in New York, about the killing of the dude up in New York. And the people was, talking about the killing and chanting, and all of a sudden, somebody started saying, "What do we want? Dead cops. When we want it now." Now I'll bet you the amount of money I got. That was a plant.
Yes, sir.
That was a plant, and all the news that he did was not about the righteousness of the people who were trying to support Ghana. Everything on television that evening was about that person saying that. What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want it now? I'll bet you anybody that was somebody who was supporting the police.
Wow.
Started that chant. Well, that's what Brother Malcolm taught us. That's what the master type of thing that the master teacher taught us.
Would you also say that Brother Malcolm was an old soul? Would you call him an old soul?
No, I don't really think so. I just think he was one of those people who was wise enough, and this is what I tell my students.
Mm-hmm.
He was a listener. He listened, and he sought out people who had information and experiences and things that he could learn from, and then he listened to them, like Dr. John Henry Clark and John Oliver Killens and other brothers, who were older than he was, but who had, and people like that. He listened to them, and he learned from them. He had that, great leaders have to be great listeners.
Mm.
I think that's what he was more than anything else. I mean, and even when we were having our meetings organized in the OAU, some of the people there, like myself, we were just new young folks, had not had hard, but when we said something, he asked us something, and he listened to us.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
And he was always seeking information. He's the reason I'm a journalist. Because he made us clearly understand the importance of the gathering and distribution of information.
Wow. And speaking of journalism and whatnot and information, I'm aware today is the 51st anniversary of the assassination of Malcolm's friend T.O. Pinto, the Kenyan freedom fighter and journalist, who was killed in front of his daughter at a driveway at the age of 38. He planned it with Malcolm, I guess. I think that the strategy for the charging the United States with human rights violations against African Americans.
Yes.
And he was just 38 years old, and he had daughters. He had 3 daughters. Like Malcolm, he was a father, a husband, and he had daughters. So what is your take on that?
See, the only way you understand the importance of what Brother Malcolm was trying to do and work, and the people who were working with him, including that brother, was that you have to put it into this was the context of the time. This is the height of the so-called Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
And this country was involved in a tremendous ongoing propaganda war with Russia. And and of course the Russians were using what was happening in this country racially against the United States in the international arena. So when Brother Malcolm started talking about taking the U.S. government for the UN Commission on Human Rights for being either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of black people, initially I'm sure they probably said, he's just talking. But as he was moving along, he was beginning to get some movement in this area. I mean, when he went to the OAU conference in 1964 in Cairo, those African heads of state issued a resolution condemning discrimination in the United States. That was unheard of. That's in my book.
Yes, sir.
And that resolution, most people even know they did it. It has never happened before or since. And it happened because of what Brother Malcolm did. And in the UN in 1964, when they're having the debate on the Congo, the U.S. and England and Belgium invading the Congo, and at the UN debates about that, 2 African diplomats said if the United States has the right to intervene in the Congo, who's to say that we don't have the right to intervene and to protect black people who are being killed in Mississippi? I'm kind of paraphrasing. Mm-hmm. But again, that was unheard of for them to make that kind of connection, and it was done because of the groundwork laid by Brother Malcolm. Wow. And I think that's when they said, this cat's got to go.
That's something, because, it's interesting. I saw the recent documentary done by CNN last year on Malcolm's assassination. And my thing, the question I have, my thing is this. Could the Nation of Islam deny Malcolm X entry into France?
No. You see, that's my position.
Mm-hmm.
That was the United States government.
Okay.
Elijah Muhammad could not call Charles de Gaulle and say, don't let Malcolm X into France.
Okay.
I mean, he wasn't even allowed to go into the airport.
Mm.
They took him off one plane, drove him down to another plane, and sent him back to England. I met the brother who was, and that's also the information that's in my book. I met the brother who was part of the group who had invited him to speak, and he told me that they were actually in the airport waiting on him. And I heard someone say they're not going to let him in, so they ran outside, and they saw them when when he got off the plane. They took him in. So they went back and called the people in London and told them that he was on his way back to London.
Wow.
That was, that was a whole. There's no doubt, as far as I'm concerned, there were elements in the Nation of Islam who were involved in the assassination of Brother Malcolm. I think they were given the go-ahead by the FBI and the New York City Police. If you do it, nothing will happen to you. And I will believe until the day I die that the only reason that was a trial at all was that one of the actual assassins got shot in the leg, running out, and got caught. If he had gotten away, there never would have been a trial.
Wow.
They would have kept saying, we're investigating. So what they did when he got caught, they ran out and picked up two other dudes who quickly threw them in jail and said that they were a part of it, two Nation of Islam brothers. And come to find out, those guys were innocent. They spent 20-some years in jail for something they didn't do. The other four people lived out their lives right over there. I think one of them, a couple of them, I think, are still alive.
Oh, they said William Bradley. He was in that commercial for Cory Booker over in Newark.
Yeah. And the FBI and they know who they are, but they were told, hey, you go. They were given a wink. So this was kind of like a collaboration between the feds and elements. I always say elements in the Nation of Islam.
Right. But then you look at the fact, I guess it's fact. I'm just going to run it by you. The fact that the secretary for Elijah Muhammad, John Ali, he was FBI. And he was responsible for correspondence between Malcolm and Elijah. He was Malcolm's once good friend.
Yeah. I've heard, too, that he was an informant. That's what I've heard.
Then also the bodyguard for Malcolm Eugene Roberts was the undercover NYPD, right? A part of the BOSS program.
Yeah.
So, basically, the Nation of Islam, you could say almost that it was compromised by law enforcement for a while. You had a lot of people that represented the FBI, NYPD, or maybe even the CIA inside the Nation of Islam. Would that be accurate to say that?
I don't know. I think there were some key people who were part of that. I don't know for sure. Only one I've heard for absolute certainty was that John Ali was. Okay. But you don't need a whole lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
But what I said, he was the third-ranking man in the nation.
Right.
At that time.
Right.
So you don't need a whole lot of people. In fact, a whole lot of them might be a problem.
Right, exactly.
If you got one key person. So I don't think there was any reason for them to have, a whole bunch of just members.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Brother Pete Bailey.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to ask you this question because I know I talked to Big Gregory a lot, and he said that they got the autopsy reports. It said that the bullets that were fired to Malcolm came they came at a downward angle, meaning that they were shot at from a top position, not from the crowd, but from a level. Because they said that the CIA actually checked into the Audubon like a week or so before, and that it might have been some other shooters, not the Nation of Islam folks that we think did it.
Well, all I know is the people that I know saw these three guys in the shooting. They said people who were actually eyewitnesses.
Right.
They said they saw these three guys. Now, I don't know if somebody else was shooting from somewhere else, but there's no way you'll make me believe that these three guys were not shooting.
Could they be shooting blanks? I thought they were shooting actual bullets.
I don't care what they were shooting. They were part of the deal.
Right. They were still part of it. They were just as guilty as the people.
They were part of this assassination.
Yes, sir.
If they were shooting blanks, whatever they were shooting, they were part of the assassination. And no one has to convince me that the government was involved in the assassination of Brother Malcolm. I think they did. I personally feel as though they gave the Nation of Islam the go-ahead. Y'all go ahead and do it, and nobody will be punished. That's what I believe happened.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Y'all go ahead and do it. And nobody was punished. And the only reason anything happened was that Hare got shot. Because one of the brothers in our organization disobeyed Brother Malcolm and had his pistol on him.
Mm-hmm.
And shot Hare and slowed him down when he got caught by the crowd. And then the police took him away. Then they had to do something. So then they ran out and picked up these two Muslim guys and said, and that was it. And everybody who was in the eyewitness side said there were at least 5 people because 2 of them started the disturbance and the other 3 did the shooting.
Wow.
So, No, man. No. They were there. They were part of it. This was a collaboration between the elements in the Nation of Islam and the FBI.
And also, I know,
police.
And New York City Police. I'm glad you brought them up because I know you said in your book you saw two officers that basically they were not responding to what was happening in the ballroom.
I could see them in the office when I first heard the shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And when I ran into the main ballroom and jumped on the stage, and then I was walking back after they had taken Brother Malcolm over to the Columbia Frontier Medical Center. I saw these two. I mean, they were just walking as though they were strolling on a beat in Central Park. Here people was screaming and crying and yelling and chairs all knocked over, and I saw them.
Wow. I know I read somewhere. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I saw them in that office because Brother Malcolm had sent me in the back, in the lobby area to wait and bring someone backstage. So I was sitting there looking toward the door when they come in, and in that office, which is kind of off to the left of the entrance. And I know I saw at least 2 or 3 policemen in there.
Yeah, cause I know I was reading, and also I talked to Roland Shepard, who was he said he was
in uniform too.
Right. And I talked to some people about this. And I talked to Roland Shepard, the white guy. He said he was there, and I read somewhere that they said that Malcolm at his rally would normally be like 3 dozen NYPD cops stationed around the area, the vicinity. Is that correct?
I mean, they were always up around the Audubon.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw these 3 in the office. I saw them.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, actually, this as well. Now I've read this. I want you to, if you could verify it, that they had, after they got Malcolm's body out the Audubon and did their investigation, whatever they called it, that there was actually a dance held in that same space by a black church. Is that correct?
Same evening,
right?
From what I understand, because that was the place where all major organizations held their parties, their big parties.
Right.
That's what it was, the Audubon Ballroom. And I was told that they actually had a scheduled affair that evening, and it went on.
That's crazy. It was black folks, right? These were black people, right? It was a black church, or
yes.
What kind of thinking what do you think about that? Like, what type of mindset you got to have to be able to do that?
Man, you got to be somebody you got to be practically a zombie. Someone who just don't think.
Mm-hmm.
How anybody could have gone into an affair in the Audubon Ballroom that evening, man, is just beyond my. And when I first heard it, I didn't hear that until maybe a couple of months later, maybe.
Wow.
I was like, come on now, are you serious? And they finally said, yeah, man, they had whatever affair was held that evening.
That's incredible. I'm glad you wrote your book because you have such great insight. I think it's something that's much needed with all this sensationalism around Malcolm X's legacy, how they're trying to really distort it. That a person like you spoke truth to power with your book is such a powerful testimony that you witnessed, in that time period. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that there has been not enough done into looking into the last year and a half of Malcolm's life, which probably was the most important year of his life. And the things he was doing in that year needs to be amplified today and continue. Can you talk about that?
That's why in my book I talk about that stuff he was doing on an international level.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was what was important, and that's why the U.S. government, because I heard years later from Dr. Clark that he had gotten 6 African countries. They had agreed to sponsor such a resolution. Now, we all know that the United States government could have told the UN, hey, y'all, kiss my royal behind.
Right.
And go take a long walk off a short pier.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have, propaganda-wise, it would have been devastating. From a propaganda perspective, it would have been devastating to have this brought up before the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. In fact, Brother Malcolm had this was the goal from the very beginning. That's why the Organization of Afro-American Unity, which was the organization that he formed, the secular organization he formed after he left the Nation of Islam, it was called a human rights organization, not a civil rights organization, because human rights is the international term.
Mm. Wow, that's incredible.
And Dr. Clark told me that at least 6 African nations had agreed, because you know a member of the UN would have to bring it up. Brother Malcolm couldn't bring it up himself. He would have to get countries in the UN to bring this subject up. So he had gotten 6 African countries who would agree to to bring something up like this, and there were several more that were kind of wavering.
Mm-hmm.
And for the United States at that time, as I said before, it's very important to remember that period, 1955, 1965, was the height of the so-called Cold War.
Mm.
And this would have been a tremendous propaganda, disaster, a nightmare for the United States government if something like this had come up at the UN.
Wow. Wow.
Even though the UN could not have made them do anything, but from a propaganda perspective, it would have been a nightmare for the United States government.
You know, the irony of all this is the fact that, 51 years later, the UN did send a research team into America to cities to investigate the conditions of Black Americans. And recently they said that Black Americans are owed reparations. So Malcolm planted those seeds from 50-something years ago that still came to bear. That it's on record now by the UN that they owe us reparations.
He understood back then that it was very important that our movement in this society be hooked up with what was going on around the world. He called it the battle against colonialism was the same as the battle against racism.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked hard to convince, and believe me, he had to work to convince African leaders of this. Because they didn't want to hear this. Many of them didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so the little bit of groundwork that happened because of what he did, it was phenomenal.
Mm.
Those, that resolution issued by the African leadership of the OAU. I mean, it's not the most militant resolution in the world, but any resolution at that time, propaganda-wise, was a nightmare for the U.S.
You know what? It was amazing to me, though.
And that resolution is in my book.
Yeah, definitely. You need to read your book. You need to read this book. I read your book in one day. He told me to read it and let me know what I thought about it. And it took me to like last week to get some time. I sat down and I read it in one day. I couldn't stop turning the pages. Go ahead.
I wrote it supposed to be read like that.
Yeah, it's so important.
I deliberately kept it, didn't want to make it huge.
Mm-hmm. You made it plain.
I tried to write it in such a way that it would be, people could read it. Especially young people, because you have a big, thick book, and they'd
be scared of you. It might be the cure for everything in that book. You're still going to be afraid to read it.
I tried to keep it in a way that would be, readable, but at the same time would have very, very important information, and some of which I'm sure that many of the readers are totally unaware of. Like the UN resolution. Definitely,
because it's not repeated in our culture. We're not told about the true story and struggles of our people anyway. They're not teaching this knowledge and stuff in this culture thing. But you definitely are a disciple of Brother Malcolm, the master teacher. You're a master student. And Brother Malcolm was also a master student. As you said, he listened very well to people to take in the information, and he studied the information. So my thing is this, is that the fact, like how you did such a great critique of Spike Lee's movie, Malcolm X. Because I remember several years ago I saw an interview with Ossie Davis, and he said that he appreciated what Spike Lee done, but he should redo the movie in 20 years from a different perspective. And I think what we talked about with the last year should be that perspective.
What I basically say about the movie is I tell young people, even today, the movie is at best an introduction to Brother Malcolm.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot see that movie and say you know Malcolm X.
Right.
You still got to read and listen and see other things. You cannot just see that movie and that movie. See, I was not disappointed in Spike Lee's movie for the simple reason that the movie, I know that Hollywood ain't going to never do the movie on Malcolm X that I want to see.
Right.
So I give Spike credit for what he did get.
Mm-hmm.
But what he got is just about as good as you're going to get out of Hollywood.
That's
if we're going to see a serious Malcolm X movie, we got to do it ourselves.
That's what we do. And we got to.
Hollywood ain't going to do it.
My thing is this, what I love about what y'all did and what Brother Malcolm did over 50 years ago, he was able to influence 6 heads of African countries and able to influence the politics of the day. He had no big budget. He had no Ford Foundation grant. He had no George Soros writing a check. He was able to do this because of the grassroots will of the people, of you all, you small group of committed people.
He had commitment, he had talent, he had wisdom, and he did his homework. Brother Malcolm used to go in Mr. Michaud's bookstore, and Mr. Michaud told me that he would sometimes just lock him in there. He would lock up and leave him in there.
Wow.
He did his homework, and that's ready, because he used to tell us, they will catch me with, because he said, everywhere I speak, I know there are people in the audience whose sole reason for being there is to catch me with my facts wrong.
Wow.
That's the only reason they're there. He said, so what I do is do things in such a way they may disagree with my interpretation of something or my opinion about something, but they will never catch me with my facts wrong.
So you basically tell me Brother Malcolm would have been a beast in this day and age with the internet and social media.
I'm telling you, man.
That would be something to see.
I'm telling you, boy.
But he's still around. We got all his videos, his speeches and whatnot. And people still, I talk to people all the time, younger people, right? They love Malcolm X. They say they Malcolmites, but they never heard one entire speech of Malcolm online. Not mentioned to the grassroots or nothing. They never heard one into Prospect for Freedom. Not one entire speech about it, bro, but they claim to be followers of Malcolm.
Yeah.
And students of his history.
Well, I think that, and I'm talking to some people about it, we need to plan some kind of conference where we talk, where we present Malcolm X for serious people. If you're not serious, stay home.
I like that.
I've gotten away from this, the grassroots and the masses. Brother Malcolm did not romanticize the street life.
Right.
One of the biggest mistakes that came out of the 60s, we began to romanticize the street life, and we're paying for that right today. Brother Malcolm did not he went through it, but he did not romanticize it. He put a great emphasis on learning and doing your homework and discipline. And if you don't believe in those things, you can't possibly say you are a supporter of Brother Malcolm. I'm sorry, just because you wear a cap or a thing no. You gotta believe in discipline, using your talent, understand the importance of distribution, gathering distribution of information, understand the importance of having a strong sense of self-esteem, not becoming. See, Brother Malcolm, when you heard him and followed him and listened to him, to me, white supremacy is like a toxin. But he made you immune to that toxin. You know how they can do things, make your body immune to certain toxins?
Right.
That's what he was. He made those of us who really listen to him, we are immune to the toxin of white supremacy. No matter how many different ways it comes, we are immune to it. But a whole lot of black folks are not, man. They have swallowed.
That's crazy. I mean,
swallowed some of the basic premises of white supremacy.
And you speaking of white supremacy, we just lost Dr. Frances Quest Welsing back on January 2nd of this year. I had a chance to interview her a couple of years ago. And if you forget that Brother Malcolm diagnosed white supremacy racism before she did. He actually diagnosed that. Because we see evidence of it now. We can look online and see what he said or quotes or whatever. And you was there listening to him and learning from him.
But she did it. She gave it that kind of scholarly treatment.
Okay.
Better than anyone else I had ever seen. But Brother Malcolm talked about it in the real practical terms as to what it was and what it was all about. But like I say, to me, I regard it as a toxin, poison. And see, when people ask me, what was it about Malcolm X that first attracted you? And I tell people all the time, it was the fact that he was the first leader I had ever heard in my life. The first time I heard him speak, I was 24 years old. And I had never heard anyone who spent as much time talking about the attacks on our minds as they did about the attacks on our bodies. He talked as much about the psychological attacks as he did about the physical attacks. I had never heard that before.
Wow.
And right now, despite these recent graves of police shootings, our biggest thing now, we're involved in psychological warfare and are totally unaware of that, most of us.
Mm-hmm.
How movies, television programs, music, all that gangster rap, all that stuff is psychological warfare.
Mm-hmm.
And we are totally immune. We are totally unaware of it.
Mm.
People used to tell me, "Why don't you just go to the movie and enjoy it?" No, because I know that I was told by a brother who taught me propaganda analysis. He taught, and this was the brother I met after Brother Malcolm. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, "Man, there ain't no such thing as an innocent movie, innocent television program, innocent book, innocent song. All of them have a message. It's up to you to find out what the message is."
Right. Exactly. That's true. Cause I never. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I never forgot that. I never forgot that.
Yes, sir.
Malcolm.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Brother Malcolm understood that clearly because he taught consistently, and more than anything else, that's what he talked about, the psychological warfare. Although the physical manifestations of white supremacy have been reduced, and they have been,
mm-hmm.
but the psychological attacks are unrelenting.
Mm.
They are unrelenting.
Wow. Yeah, I definitely, every time I turn on my TV now, and I look at the show, it always showing this, Gods of Egypt movie trailer, right? Have you heard about that?
About what now?
The Gods of Egypt movie trailer. There's a movie coming out I guess this is the last weekend in February of this year, and it's about the Gods of Egypt.
No, I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, but the controversy is by basically an all-white cast playing the Gods of Egypt. It's like a multi-million-dollar budget movie. And people are people of color are outraged, and I guess the director apologized some months ago, but still, I'm betting it's going to make a lot of money.
Yeah,
regardless of that fact.
We straight out of Compton.
Right.
Straight out of Compton.
Mm-hmm.
That's psychological warfare.
Mm.
Because gangster rap music was an attack on the minds of young black folks, especially young brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a whole lot of young dudes who are either dead or in jail today because of being seduced into that whole attitudes and concepts pushed by those gangster rapper types. And of course, now some of them are living like they're very respectable gentlemen.
Mm.
And as far as I'm concerned, they're living off blood money. The type things they were pushing in that stuff got a whole lot of young dudes either killed or in jail.
Mm-hmm.
And straight out of Compton, right at that. Those brothers who were using rap music as a political thing got completely pushed to the side.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones who came out there, glorifying street life and glorifying violence and against each other, because that's where most of it end up being. And that kind of hedonistic me, myself, and our lifestyle, and the women of this and that, the misogynistic things, that's all that stuff. That's psychological warfare. And we went for it hook, line, and sinker. Too many of our people did.
Wow. It's interesting. I contrast with that from 50-something years ago. I saw a Gil Noble episode where he interviewed some of Malcolm's, followers and whatnot. And they talked about how, somebody like Bumpy Johnson saw the value of what Malcolm made and was willing to offer him protection, and he turned it down.
Yeah.
And he was a big-time gangster, right? He was a Harlem Godfather.
He knew what would happen. He knew what would happen if he got connected to Bumpy Johnson. Of course, they would use it against him.
Right. But Bumpy Johnson was sincere, you think? Was he sincere about protecting Malcolm, or?
Yeah, but Bumpy Johnson, he did the same thing. He was like the equivalent of those Jewish gangsters and Italian gangsters who did all that stuff and then all of a sudden became very respectable.
Mm-hmm.
But many of the Italian and Jewish families in this country today came out of families that were gangsters in the early 1900s.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
And now they're all professors and doctors and lawyers and everything.
I went to school with some of them. I went to school with some of them.
Right. You go back and do some checking.
Right. But you know what Lucky Luciano said? He said, behind every great wealth, there's a great crime. That's a tree right there. So let me ask you about the Nat Turner movie that was recently purchased by Fox Searchlight. You think they're going to put that out anytime soon, that movie about Nat Turner that the brother made, Nate Parker?
Yeah, they may do it, but and the white folks ain't going to make no Nat Turner movie that's going to be legitimate in Rio.
Okay.
They may put something out there.
But it's not going to be like something that's going to be like you said,
it's not going to be the real Nat Turner.
But it got made, but like you said, go ahead.
Stop thinking that they're going to, we got to they're not going to do it. Now, they may put a Nat Turner movie out there, but it's not going to be the Nat Turner who he really was. And we just have to. They're not even going to put out the real Martin Luther King.
This is true too. We saw that with Selma.
All they can reduce Martin Luther King to is "I Have a Dream."
Right.
Anybody who thinks that was a total Martin Luther King need to read his last book. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community?
You know what's interesting? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Brother Bailey. Go ahead.
See what Dr. King is saying in that book. I have read excerpts from that book to some of my students, and I said, "Who said?" They said, "Malcolm." I said, "Well, that's Dr. King talking," and that was his last book, published a year before he was assassinated.
Wow. And that's another thing about this. People don't think that Dr. King and Malcolm was on the same team. I know I just came back just recently from visiting the home site of Coretta Scott King outside of Marion, Alabama. And it's my understanding that Malcolm went down to Selma just like, weeks really before he was assassinated to speak to the SNCC people at that Brown Chapel church, and he met with Coretta.
He did.
And he met with Coretta, and Coretta really appreciated him.
And he tried to go see Dr. King, but they wouldn't let him to see him.
Yeah, but I think Coretta, she really was, from my understanding, she respected him a lot, once she got a chance to meet him and hear him speak.
Yeah. He was, and I found out years later that there were people in his camp, people who supported him, who we were not, they were not around us, but you would be surprised sometimes, some of the well-known black folks who were supporting Brother Malcolm quietly.
Exactly.
And there were people from his camp and from King's camp who were having very quiet meetings with each other, trying to set up a meeting between these two brothers. And I don't think they might not never have been buddies, but I think they would have developed a working relationship with each other that would have been dynamite. And J. Edgar Hoover was aware of that. I have a statement in my book that I read in a book by a writer named Anthony Summers, a British writer. He did a biography of J. Edgar Hoover. And he quotes J. Edgar Hoover saying in that book, when he was having a luncheon meeting with then Senator Lyndon Johnson, quote, "We would have no problems if we get those two to fighting each other to kill one another off," end of quote. Those two were Brother Malcolm and Dr. King.
Wow.
I have that quote in my book.
That's incredible. I know I had heard of Albert Sampson, who is the housing director for the SCLC during Dr. King's time, and he said that Dr. King called a meeting back in August of 1966 of his top SCLC lieutenants, and he told them in the room that he was told by a black FBI agent from California that he would be assassinated by the government. This was back in 1966.
Yeah.
And we don't.
And in 2013, when they were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, the Washington Post ran an article on that day, August 28th, 2013, in which they say, as a result of Dr. King's March on Washington speech, the FBI launched one of the biggest surveillance operations in its entire history.
There you go. Wow.
and now, J. Edgar Hoover wasn't doing that because of no "I Have a Dream."
That's right.
He looked at the rest of Dr. King's speech. That was a tough speech.
Yeah, it was.
But it has been reduced to I Have a Dream, and I think many of the King people supported it to get that holiday.
I mean, yeah, that's the politics, right? You know, all people Reagan signed into law, making King a holiday.
Get that holiday for that. Man, I tell people, read Dr. King's last book written in the first person, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. And you will see, get a much clearer idea as to why Dr. King was assassinated.
Wow, that's incredible. But, you know, once again, it's frustrating, too, because it's like you got to repeat this stuff over and over again, and people feel like they still don't get it, or they don't want to get it.
Well, that's because many of our people have decided to be willfully ignorant.
There you go.
Not get information in 2016. You have to say to yourself, I am going to be ignorant.
Yeah.
Because there's too much information out here. So if you're ignorant in 2016, it's because you have basically made a conscious decision, I am going to be ignorant. And I think a whole lot of our people have done that.
Definitely, because I know I'm in Memphis, right, and I interviewed folks that normally would be on Dr. King's security detail, because when he used to come to Memphis, he would always have an all-black police security detail. But the last time he came to Memphis, he didn't have no protection. And a lot of the police officers were called out. So they let you know already. Then the guy who controlled the police and the fire department in Memphis at that time was Frank Holloman. And he used to be Jacob Hooper's number 3 man in D.C. for 25 years.
Yeah. Well,
so they let you know what time it is.
I've written a play called Malcolm Martin Medgar.
Yes, sir.
The three of them in the hereafter, talking about things that have happened since their assassinations. And I discussed that in the play.
Wow.
It's called Malcolm Martin Medgar. I haven't had a full-scale production yet, but I have had readings of the play in New York and Washington and Columbia, South Carolina, Richmond, Virginia. I've had readings of the play in those places, and people have been very, very enthusiastic about it. But it's called Malcolm Martin Medgar.
We got to find a way to make that happen to a full-scale production then.
Hereafter, they're looking down and commenting on things.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Assassinations.
Especially what's going on now with us. It's like we lack this type of leadership right now from black leadership. And I mean, we lack it really bad, because I think about, you know, I was looking at Mickey Leland about a couple of days ago, just looking him up and researching him. And it's really sad that a lot of us don't know about Mickey Leland from Texas, who took over Barbara Jordan's position in Congress, and who tried to actually solve the problem of world hunger. He actually was for real about that. And how they took him down to Ethiopia. They killed him. They basically killed him in Ethiopia, come on with a plane crash. They couldn't find his body for days, even though you have all the military and people looking for him. They knew where he was at all that time, to just let him die. But his legacy is not well known among our people. Like people like Allen Payne Powell Jr., his legacy is not really well known. He died on April 4th, 1972, 4 years after King.
I know how painful it is. I teach as an adjunct professor at the University of District of Columbia. And I have taught as an adjunct professor. I have taught as an adjunct professor at 3 other colleges.
Yes, sir.
Including Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Hunter College in New York, and Virginia Union University in Richmond. I taught a couple of freshman orientation courses as an adjunct. And, I mean, it is just painful to see that people are not teaching our youngsters history. And giving them some kind of idea as to, in fact, I'm planning on doing something. I'm now the president of the C.J. Lewis Tucker chapter, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and we're getting ready to plan something, and I'm getting ready to plan something for my students to do. I'm going to have students in my I teach a course on feature writing, and an assignment that I'm getting ready to give them is they're going to do an article, a feature article as part of their final exam. Which is going to be is way up in May, but I'm going to get them started on it now, to thinking about it. They're going to do a final exam on black folks 21 and under who were killed or brutalized in the movement, because I want them to understand there were people your age who were killed. They know vaguely about the 4 little girls in Birmingham, but there were others. So they're going to have to do research. All I'm going to do, they're going to have to do the research, and they're going to have to write a feature article on young blacks 21 and under who were killed and brutalized or killed in the civil rights movement.
Wow.
That's the assignment I'm giving my students.
That's brilliant. Yes.
My feature writing students. And that's the article that's going to be a part of that final grade in May. I'm gonna probably give it to them about the middle of next month, so they'll have at least. I'll give it to them. In fact, if I give it to them at the beginning of March, so they have all of March and all of April to do the research and work on it. And they have to turn it into me before, when it's time to do the final exams, the first week in May.
That's excellent, man. They are blessed to have somebody like you as their teacher. that's developed critical thinking right there. And that's missing a lot, from what's going on right now.
Make them aware, because they just don't know that there were people that age. Those brothers who started to sit in Greensboro,
that's right,
were college students.
That's right.
Those people who were knocked down with those fire hoses and police dogs and everything in Birmingham were young people, sometimes some as young as 10 and 12 years old.
I'm thinking about Samuel Young down in Tuskegee.
In Tuskegee, my hometown.
Yeah, that's right. So, you definitely right about that.
They're going to have to, and I'm just going to give them, they're going to have to do the research themselves.
Mm-hmm. But they got the internet, so they could cheat. I ain't saying they cheating, but, they got a great, advantage.
Don't give them too much to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. That sounds great. And I want to ask you about this other person. I know you knew him. I believe you knew him, like Leon Forex Amir.
Yeah. I didn't know him.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know him. See, I think I have to make it very clear. I was a part of the OA, Organization of Afro-American Unity.
Right.
Which was that's what those was. I was not I try to make this very clear because sometimes it gets confusing. I was not a part of Brother Malcolm's inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
I really wasn't, and I don't claim to be because I hate to see people make claims like that.
Right.
So too many they make claims like that about Dr. King and Brother Malcolm. I was not a part of his inner circle. I was a strong supporter. I was a founding member of the Organization of Afro-American Unity.
That's
I
right.
was the editor of the organization's newsletter. And I got to know him, and I was involved with him, and I was sometimes in a situation with him there were only about 5 or 6 people there, but I was not a part of his inner circle, and I was not a part of security and that kind of thing. That was mostly done by brothers who had come with him from the Nation of Islam.
So was that a Muslim Mosque Incorporated? Leon was?
Mosque Incorporated. That was a religious organization that he founded after leaving the Nation of Islam. For those people who wanted to follow him from a religious perspective. The OAAU were those of us who wanted to follow him from a secular perspective. And he knew that there were people like us out there who were not going to become Muslims, but who really wanted to work with him, and he was aware of that, which is why he set up the OAAU.
I'm glad you clarified that, but I was just curious about him because he's not even, like Pinto, he's not been mentioned really about what happened in the aftermath of Malcolm's assassination.
Yeah, I believe the brothers that I knew of, but I didn't know them,
mm-hmm.
And I don't claim to know them. See, people have to understand that we had less than a year, man.
Right.
We really had, those of us who got involved with Brother Malcolm, we had less than a year of being working with him. I mean, we learned a whole lot in that year, man. If you were really serious, you can learn a whole, and I did. I mean, I tell people I literally got the equivalent of, we learned a whole lot in that year, man. If you were really serious, you can learn a whole, and I did. I tell people I literally got the equivalent of a PhD in about 10 months.
Wow. In
terms of human rights, race relations,
mm-hmm.
psychological warfare.
That's right. But the fact.
PhD, man.
Yeah, I believe you because I would say this: even though you was not a part of his inner circle, his wife thought enough of you to make you a pallbearer. That's how he thought of you. The fact that his wife would actually make you a pallbearer.
That's so interesting because I didn't know. I had only met her, a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
But she told later when I asked her why, she said because he was very impressed with what I did with the newsletter, and he talked about me to her. He called me that college boy because I had that real kind of Joe Collins. You know.
Yeah, I see the picture with you on the front of the book.
And he was very impressed with what I did with the newsletter, and he told me that's why she did it.
But basically, he thought enough of you. You was close enough to his inner circle for her to do that. So I mean, he thought about you and talked about you with his wife. So he had a lot of respect for you. That's to me, that would mean a lot to have that type of respect from somebody like Malcolm X.
Oh yeah, well it does.
They can take you a long way, man. They have that type of respect, yeah, from somebody like him. That's amazing.
It does. It has tremendous, but I still don't want to, act like, oh yeah, I was one of the, one of his, his close advice, that kind of stuff. I really wasn't.
But you've been listening to him. You've been listening to him, like in Harlem since 1962, correct?
Since '62, yeah.
All right. So you've been knowing about him for 3 years.
And the first time I heard him speak, everywhere he spoke in the New York metropolitan area, I was there.
So basically, you did the opposite of Gil Noble, and I commend Gil Noble for doing the stuff he did after Malcolm died and being honest about it.
Yeah, well, Gil told me he said, he said, I'm gonna confess, man, I was scared to get anywhere near him. When he was alive, Gil told me that.
Right, he was honest about it.
He was honest about it.
But in fact, he spent the rest of his life trying to make up for it, though, with his media work and acting.
He really did. He did some incredible stuff.
Yeah, I thank you for the stuff with the Malcolm stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
He did some incredible stuff.
Wow, man, that's amazing.
Listen,
yes, sir.
I gotta get off.
Yes, sir.
Now, could you send me a copy of this?
I can send you a copy of this. There'll be no problem.
Okay.
I could email you. Want me to email it to you or send it in the mail? And I have it online. I can send you a link too as well too.
Okay, yeah, but I still want a hard copy too.
Yes, sir.
Send me a link and send me and I guess you can email it. When I can get it printed off.
Yeah, you get it. Yeah. It'll be like an audio file.
You can do it like that. You can do it.
Okay,
like
what's
that.
your email address?
A. Peter B.
Yes, sir.
A. Peter B. at Verizon.net.
All right, got it. Okay, I got it.
A. Peter B. at Verizon.net. And anyone wanted a copy of the book, that's also where they can contact me, because you have to order the book directly from me. It's not in any stores or Amazon or anything like that. It has to be ordered directly from me.
And I definitely would say that people need to get a copy of this book, and I'll definitely make sure on my end that I promote it as such. I just want to thank you, Brother Billy, once again. A.
Peter B. at Verizon.net.
Yes, I want to thank you once again. The words of great suggestion. We love you madly, and keep on producing and pushing.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
Take care.
Get better.